All right. Hey guys, Mr. Kyle, Myers Mathematics, and let's just jump right into it. So, if you're getting ready for the SAT, there's a couple things that are important to know on there. And I'm actually going to make a mini course on this pretty soon with the 5 most important things that you need to know about the SAT. Just some quick little things you need to know, quick little things you can tweak to up your math score on the SAT by probably like 50 points or more. So let's just go ahead and look at it. You can probably see this first one on here, but I'll scroll down to it. What calculator can I use? And I'll give it some more space here. So let me go back here. A little bit more space. I have some more writing space here. What calculator can I use and what can I do with it? So question number 1. Basically, the only restriction for calculators is if it does anything that's like a phone, right? So if it can, connect to the internet, that's a no-go. Also, if it can do, if it has a keyboard, apparently for whatever reason they don't like keyboards, so no keyboard stuff. I would recommend probably using a TI 83, plus for all of these, TI 84 or a TI 89. All of them do about the same stuff. It's really just the computing speed, so it's a little faster. So if you don't care too much about your computing speed, you can just do a TI 83 and you'll be fine with that. And the reason why I would recommend one of those is because it does some really cool things. And that's actually the second part of this question. What can I do with it? So if you want to do some really cool things with your TI 83, 84, 89, there's actually some free programs. Just Google like free programs for the TI 84 or whichever calculator you have. And there's some places where you can get some free programs on there. Just make sure you get like a legitimate website and stuff like that. But some of the things that you want to look for to download, maybe the most popular app out there that you can download on your, well, it's not an app necessarily like you would think of for your phone, but you can actually put a quadratic solver on your TI 83, 84, or 89. You can do that. You can also put other things on there like matrix. You can have a solver for a system of equations. Now this one's a little harder to find, but it's out there. System of equations solver, where you just type in the A, B, and C values for a system, for both systems, and then it spits out the answers. Now, alternatively, you can actually just do a matrix, or just do a matrix. And no, I'm not talking about the movie. All right, this is no Neo stuff. You just do a matrix. So what you do is you go into your calculator and you do matrix. So I'll put the steps over here. So basically you go matrix, and that's a button on the calculator. It's like second and then math, I think. Matrix, and then edit. And then you do if you're solving a system of 2 equations, 2 variables, which is typical for the SAT, then what you would want to do is you would want to do 2 rows, 3 columns, since you'll have 2 equations. And you're going to have 2 variables, but you'll have an x, a y, and a number. So you're going to have 3 columns. So 2 by 3 matrix. And then you just type in all the values. Make sure that they're in the same order. Make sure they're lined up. So the x, the y, then the number. And then type in all those values. So type in values. All right. And then the next thing you want to do actually is you want to go back to matrix. So once you get that matrix done, go back into matrix and click on RREF, it'll do RREF on your main calculator where you type in stuff like 3 times 4 and all that. Go back into the matrix. Swear it's not a reference. And you click on matrix again. And then you click on that matrix that you created. So usually it's like matrix A, looks something like this. And then you just hit enter. So RREF actually stands for reduced row echelon form, which is a fancy way to say that it's going to solve that system for you. Now, if you find a system that you can download, like a system solver, that you can just download on your calculator, go for it. But if you can't, you can always just do this little matrix trick. And I show this to my students as well. So check that out. Quadratic solver, a system of equation solver. And then the other thing is just you can graph lines and equations and stuff. And when you graph things, like you can graph a system if it's already like y equals mx plus b, and then you just find out where they cross, and then that's where they cross. That's the answer to the system. You can graph inequalities. So don't be afraid to just graph the equations that they have. If they don't have it with x's and y's, you can just say like, oh, if they have a j variable and an s variable, just make the j variable the y and make the s variable the x, and then graph it. You can graph pretty much anything that they give you if they give it to you in an equation form. Okay? It doesn't have to be x's and y's. So graph whatever they give you if you're on the calculator portion, if you're having trouble figuring out what to do. Right? And that should help you to get that problem solved. All right, so next, how to master multiple choice. So again, I'm going to create some space here. How to master the multiple choice. So I actually made another video on this called multiple choice hacks or tricks. I'm not sure if I said hacks or tricks. But either way, all you need to do is just look at what they've given you. All right, so usually there's an outlier. All right, and the common misconception about outliers is that they're always wrong. It's not true. Sometimes an outlier is the right answer, but usually there's an outlier, and if there is, then outliers, kind of by definition here, this is my definition, but by my definition, this is how I would define an outlier. It's something that has between a 0% to 20% chance of being right. Okay. Now, if it's an outlier, that means it's also different from the others. But if it's different enough from the others, then it most likely has either a 0%, 20%, or somewhere in between percent chance of being right. Now, if you don't know if there's an outlier or if there's not an outlier, then statistically, you have a 1 in 4 chance. You have a 25% chance of guessing the right answer. But if there's an outlier and you're not sure what to do, usually an outlier has less of a percent chance of being right, so you're better off not going for that outlier if you have no idea how to solve for that problem. Okay, so if you don't know how to solve the problem, don't go for the outlier, go for something else. The outlier is less likely to be right than the other 4 options. Okay, now it's going to look different than the others. So check out that other video. It's called Multiple Choice Hacks. I'll put a link for it in the description. But basically, the whole video was about how to spot an outlier and then how to spot 2 that are really similar. Because usually there's also 2 that are really similar. And of course, this is kind of vague, but if you look at that other video, you see what I'm talking about. There's usually 2 that are really similar. So all you need to do is look for the 2 that are really close, and those have a higher percent chance of being right. So I would say roughly maybe 22, 23%. No, not 23. That'd be less than 25. JK, LOL. Let's say like 27, 28 maybe. So maybe a 28% to even up to like a 50% chance of being right. Sometimes if you can get it narrowed down to 2 two options that are really close, and you also look at the other two options and they just don't make any sense, and you can like for sure say it's not those two. Sometimes between the two that are left, it's like, if you can pretty much eliminate the other two because they're just terrible options, and or the two that are really similar are really good options, you could have as high as a 50% chance of being right on either one of those. Now, I put 28% because, of course, 25 is the regular. So if it's just two that are really close, but then the other two options are not too far away from those two that are really close, there's not really a good two that are really similar and different from the other two, then your chances are not that much higher that those two are going to be, either one of those two are going to be the right answer. So sometimes that just happens. Hard questions are hard. And sometimes hard questions are hard because the answer choices are not really good for you. But you have a higher chance of getting the problem right by guessing if you pick between two that are really similar and you don't pick one that is the least like the others. Okay, now this is like a last-ditch thing. So obviously you want to be able to just solve the question, but on hopefully just those one or two that you have no idea, or if you're kind of stuck on, let's say, 5 to 10 problems, you can use some of these tricks here to narrow down what you're kind of thinking is supposed to be the answer, or the ballpark of the answer. Okay, so moving on to the next thing here. Tackling those hard geometry problems. Oop, did not mean to do that. There we go. Okay. Tackling those hard geometry problems. So there's actually some really cool tricks with this. One of the things is, and actually this is pretty much the thing, okay? So in order to tackle hard geometry problems, the number one thing you can do is measure. Measure, right? They don't allow you to bring, a compass and a straight edge or a protractor or anything like that, but you can still measure things, right? So on your piece of paper that you have for scratch work, right? Every corner of that piece of paper is 90 degrees, right? So if I were to zoom in on this here, let's say I creased this paper so that it folded over perfectly, then right at that crease here, or maybe I'll go this way with it. Right at that crease, if you folded it perfectly, you would have a 45-degree angle. And you can fold it perfectly. All you have to do is match up the sides. So then, boom, you have a 45-degree angle. And then you could even do it again, right? And if you did it again, you'd have a 22.5-degree angle. So if you want to measure an angle, you can. You could actually keep going, right? You could do it one more time and have an 11.25-degree angle, right? So you can measure things and you can figure out, hey, like I can use my scratch paper to figure out if this is a 90-degree angle. Is it close to 90? Is it close to 45? Is it close to 22.5? What is it close to? And that will help you to figure out what to do with the problem, especially if they want to know that angle, right? Like let's say this is X. If that's X, and it basically is the same thing as that 45-degree angle, that means your answer choice would be 45. So look for the answer choice, A, B, C, or D, that's closest to 45. And that's your answer. So sometimes you don't actually have to do any actual math work because you can just measure the angles. Now, when they say it's not drawn to scale, be careful because sometimes it's really not drawn to scale. But actually, fun fact, when they say not drawn to scale on some of their pictures, it actually is still drawn to scale. They just say that because they want to try to throw you off. So, yeah. And if they give you a given angle, like let's say they say an angle is 45, if it looks like it's 45, well, then that means that what they said was accurate and you can kind of go off of your measurements. Now, if they give you a question where it's like this, and they say this is 45 degrees, right? Then you know, hey, measuring is not going to help me here because they obviously did not draw that to scale. This is not 45. No, it's probably more like 80, right? It's very close to a 90-degree angle. So if they say something like that and it doesn't look right, but they say not drawn to scale or whatever, then don't use this trick. It won't work, right? But usually you can use this trick to some degree. Now you can also use it to measure. On your scratch paper, you can actually just put tick marks on it. So let's say they have a diagram and they've got a triangle like this, and then another triangle another shape like that or something. You're supposed to find a missing side or whatever. Let's say this is X, and they say this is 7. Okay, well, you can use your paper and line up your paper. So let me just line up my paper here. So here's my paper. I'm just kind of writing a paper here. It's obviously not drawn to scale. LOL. But let's say this is my paper. It's my scratch work paper. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I can just put some tick marks here and here. And that's 7. So like half of that would be 3.5. All right. And then half of that, let me go back a little bit. Half of that would be, 1.75? Something like that. So then I can go over here and use it to measure and figure out, hey, this X, it looks like it's about 5 maybe. It could be about 7. And then you can just take your paper, move it over, look at where you have your tick marks on your paper, and then figure out what X is. Okay? You can measure things. If you measure things with little tick marks, fold it in half, well, there's half. There you go. And then you have tick marks on there to show different measures. And you can measure things. All right? So tackling those hard geometry problems doesn't actually have to be that hard because you can measure, and at the very least, measuring helps to narrow down the answer choices so that you can make a good guess and have at least a 50-50 chance. All right? So second to last thing here, should I skip hard problems? The easy answer to this is yes. You should skip hard problems. But basically, the reason why I put this on here is because if you skip hard problems, it helps you out. Like it's a mental game. Yes, because it's a mental game. And also because you can come back to them. You don't want to waste your time, because don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. And also don't waste your mental energy. All right? You want some good vibes going into this thing. You want to go in, do all the things that are like super easy, only do the problems that you're like, hey, I can probably get this done in like a minute or less. All right? Then you're feeling pretty good. You get through all the ones, skip all the ones that you're just like, all right, I could probably solve this, but it might take a little bit, so I'll come back to it later. I don't feel like doing this right now. Save it for later. And then come back to it and actually look at it and actually be like, okay, like how would I actually solve this? And then if you're not sure right away, skip it again and come back to it again. All right? You can skip hard problems multiple times, and that's fine. Okay? When I did a mock SAT a couple episodes back, I skipped one problem like 3 times. I ended up getting it right, but I skipped it like 3 times because one, it had a lot of text, and I skip problems that have lots of text. Right? That's something I would recommend. Skip if it has a lot of text. Okay? So definitely do that. That does not has. I have a terrible writing sometimes if I'm not like really, really trying. Anyways, so skip it if it has a lot of text. That's what I did. And then I came back to it and I read it and I was like, like I think it's A, but I'm not really sure. And then I went back to it and I was like, wait, it's not A. A is what they wanted me to think it was. It's actually D. And then I ended up getting it right. So go check that out. It's 2 videos, one on the non-calculator, one on the calculator. The non-calculator has like a audio problem that I didn't realize at first. So, I mean, it is what it is, but yeah. All right, so that brings me to the last thing here, if I can ever get to it. Yeah, there we go. All right, so how to figure out what to do on tricky word problems. So this, the figuring out what to do thing is best done by marking the text. All right, so you want to mark the text, marking the text. All right, well, how do I do that? I'm sorry, I just hit my lamp over here. how do I mark the text? Okay, well, you could, go full English on it and be like, oh, do this, do this, do this, do this, this. But remember, I'm not an English teacher, and I'm sure you're not insanely excited about doing some Englishy stuff to a math problem. Okay, you're like, oh, English, I do English to English problems. Okay, but yes, and this is why this is a really easy way. All right, so all you do is you circle the numbers and letters. I don't know why I drew an M. The numbers and letters. Okay, letters because they're basically numbers, right? Letters are variables, usually, something that you're going to solve for sometimes. And then underline the context. All right, so what I mean there is the words around the numbers and letters. So if I said Johnny is 8 years old, okay, circle the 8, underline years old. 8 represents years old, okay, and maybe underline Johnny too, because that's referring to Johnny, okay. And actually, next to people, if you're trying to figure out somebody's age or whatever, I might like write a J above Johnny and circle that, because that's the variable I'm going to use. So I do that a little bit too sometimes, but that's not really needed. Circle the numbers, underline the context, and then box or highlight. I was about to write high tight. I cannot spell. I don't know what it is. What? There's an F. Highlight. There we go. So I'm actually going to highlight here. Do some highlighting. Highlight. Or box. Let's see if I can draw a box here. Highlight or box what they want. What they want. So that's usually the question. If you see a question mark, box like pretty much that whole sentence. You don't have to draw a box or a highlight around the whole sentence. Just exactly what they want. So sometimes you don't have to highlight the whole thing, just what they want. Okay, so do that, and it will help you to figure out what to do on the word problem, because you can get rid of the fluff and you can just zero in on what's important. Okay, the numbers are important, the context is important, and what they want is important. Everything else is really just fluff. You don't really need it. Okay, it helps you to understand the problem, but you don't really need it. Okay, so circle the numbers, underline the context, box or highlight what they want. And that is how you figure out what to do on tricky word problems. So I hope you found this helpful. I have a guide called the 5 Math Mistakes Everyone Makes and How to Avoid Them. It's free on my website, Myers Mathematics, link in the description below. Go check that out. I hope it's super helpful. And like I said, I'm working on a mini course that kind of expounds upon these with some videos for each of the 5 topics and some actual practice that you can do with each one and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming out pretty soon. So hope this video was helpful. Again, if it was, go ahead and throw a like in there. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. And I hope to see you in another episode.